challenges and also inspire others who are interested in this topic. So our first panelist will be Michelle. We've already heard her speak, delivering a very inspiring keynote address today. Michelle is a lawyer, entrepreneur, and venture capitalist with Digital DX Ventures. I will read an abbreviated version of her remarkable bio. She invests in startups in using AI and data to better diagnose and treat illness. And she's a West Coast ambassador to Nobel Laureate Foundation and serves on the board of Nefrosant. And she mentors students in Stanford School of Engineering for global marketing and entrepreneurship. So welcome, Michelle. Let's move on to the next. Amanda Gorman is a board certified pediatric nurse practitioner specializing in primary and urgent pediatric care and an early adopter of health tech for the family. She founded Nest Collaborative. She holds an undergraduate degree in nursing and psychology from Columbia and Fordham universities and received her graduate nursing education in pediatric primary care. She spent 6 years in emergency and peri-operative nursing at New York Presbyterian Hospital. She and her husband, a family physician, have 2 small children and live in Connecticut. The next speaker here. Paula, UberDoc founder and CEO, Dr. Paula Muto, is a practicing vascular and general surgeon in solo practice for over 20 years and is the owner of Muto Vein Centeri. She graduated from Amherst College with a degree in English and then neuroscience and completed medical school at New York Medical College. She did her residency at Tufts New England Medical Center. She's a member of a family of physicians and surgeons who've practiced in Massachusetts for over 50 years, and she's outspoken advocate for patient care and passionate about women's health issues. She was named one of the female physician executives to know in 2018 by Becker's Hospital Review. Next. So I think we also have Solis. She started Zazi, a healthcare consulting firm, to help companies scale medicine with technology. I believe that she believes the scaling will work if healthcare experiences and outcomes are positive for patients, physicians, and businesses. As a computer engineer, physician, and patient, she understands the challenges on all sides, and she strategizes with companies focused on the big picture of digital transformation. She believes the purpose of life is connection with those around us, and she actively cultivates this love through advocacy, teaching, and volunteering. She's an advocate for embracing differently abled folks as care providers, restructuring medical education, and reforming medical culture. She teaches medical students about empathy and counsels students and physicians on alternative career paths besides clinical medicine. She mentors hackathons and writes articles on topics she's passionate about. And she's currently writing a long form article on the misuse of the phrase physician burnout. So welcome all of you to this panel. Shubra, did I read out yours? We didn't have her. So Shubra, can you please get started by introducing yourself and talk for a few minutes about what you do and what is the primary advice that you would give to women in STEM and healthcare and the intersection of the two?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Shubra Jain. I am trained as a primary care physician and have been on the operating side where I was leading product for a healthcare technology startup for a little while. And for the last 3 years or so, have been investing primarily in early stage healthcare technology companies across the country. I'm a big advocate of diversity in entrepreneurship and also in company building and operating. And I currently mentor folks from Springboard Enterprises, which is an organization for women who are starting companies in life sciences and healthcare that I encourage all of you to check out. I also am on the advisory board of an organization called the Femtech Collective, which provides a lot of resources, including pitch coaching and fundraising coaching for anyone, men or women, trying to build companies in the broader space of female health and femtech, which has been neglected for a long time and is just starting to gain more traction amongst both the entrepreneur and investor community. Personally, I am passionate about changing how healthcare is delivered today in our country by increasing the diversity in the industry and helping more people access healthcare at affordable costs and remaining healthy rather than waiting until the last moment and then having our system have to care for the sick.
That's nice. Michelle, would you like to continue on that vein and talk about any advice you would have for startups or anybody starting in this field, and what areas are worth looking at if you were to start a company?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, I think that what I love about this panel and a lot of the women that I'm now working and getting to know more is that we really have to get better, and we're doing a better job now finally at working together, at advocating for one another. I started over a year now, 2 years ago, a fellowship at my fund where I've got about 20 fellows every quarter, and most of them are a lot of women and minorities from schools and work all over the place, to really try and help mentor what it's like to start a fund or to look at a company in the early stage. And so I've done a couple of talks on that as well. And I think it's really important for entrepreneurs to understand what investors are looking at, and also to find that supportive network. Because, for instance, I get a lot of people that come in with ideas and they're not appropriate for a fund, or we can't fund them, not in our vertical, or we're still raising part of our fund, or whatever the reason is. But I always make an effort to try and connect them with someone, or reach across the table and try and give them ideas and suggest ideas on the patenting side, introduce them to lawyers and things like that. So I think that the only way that we're going to support our young female entrepreneurs is to really educate and inform and create supportive communities. As all the women I think on here seem to be very dedicated to doing, which is inspiring. For young entrepreneurs, I think there are very basic, important things that you want to get across when you're trying to present an idea. And I don't see this happen enough. The first thing is, what are you really doing? Like, just one sentence. Can you just say what you're doing? I am identifying, Alzheimer's with a scan that looks at the buildup of beta amyloid in the brain, right? Okay, I know now what you're doing. And when the rest of your presentation comes along, I'm following you now. I'm following you. If I don't get that right in the beginning, all that great information is wasted on me. And the other thing I think is also really important for entrepreneurs to be aware of is, as I mentioned in my talk, diversity, right? If I see teams that are, all guys coming in with not a single woman as an advisor or anything, the C-suite, I kind of say, well, where, what input are you really getting? Are you really getting a 360-degree view of your problem? Or are you really just looking at, 180 degrees of it or less, right? Who are you serving? And does your team reflect the patients you're serving, the people you're trying to help, the change you're trying to make? And so that's one of the most basic things. If I just start on a very high level, look for a collaborative and supportive group of people, identify and clarify what you're doing on a very, very, very high level, and make sure you have thought about the diversity of thought within your team, and have people around you that challenge you. Don't just agree and repeat whatever you say. So, and then the last thing I would say is always look towards security for what you're doing. So IP, biobanks, build whatever you're building. Always try and think of how you can create some, whether it's really solid security, whether it's, an effort, at least you're thinking from an investor side, we're looking at giving you money. How can we be sure there's some value there, that if something happens to you, get by a car, that there's some value there, or someone else can take over, or whatever it is. We want to make sure you've thought through that and you have provided that for us when we are looking at investing capital. So I think those would be the high level things I might share.
Yeah, that was interesting, because as I was watching the pitches today, it seems that when women enter the entrepreneurial role, we also address some of those issues that would not have been addressed otherwise, which are specific to women, and we have a deeper understanding of those issues. So we are half the population, so these issues need to be addressed, and having more women in the field, I think, helps address those issues as well, and hopefully in a better way to improve outcomes for women. Do you want to go next, Paula?
Sure. So thank you for inviting me today. It's been very interesting. The pitches have been great. So just kind of building off Michelle. So I'm a surgeon. I'm a surgeon by trade from an entire family of surgeons. My dad before me, who was also an entrepreneur and had inventions. My brother, my husband, two uncles. So all in Massachusetts collective century. I didn't like the way the system worked. I didn't think patients could get to doctors. I took it very personally. I came up with a simple solution. Next thing you know, we had a technology. Next thing we know, we have 4,000 doctors adopting to the technology. So it's kind of exciting. My journey is interesting because I came at it from a woman physician. I was in the height of the meritocracy of 1985, where all the colleges and schools I attended had been fully co-ed for 5 years before I started. So I wasn't in that first round. I was in that second round. Nothing really bothered me going forward, except that you kind of just knew the situation. When I applied for surgical residency, there were programs that didn't graduate women. I was well advised, don't apply to those. It's just like applying to a college that didn't accept men. So I was guided through by advisors and mentors through the Scylla and Charybdis of all of the issues in terms of diversity and issues of inclusion for women, and kind of pushed my way through. And got my license to fly. I get the psychic in my hand, and I became a certified surgeon, vascular surgeon, on call, et cetera. When I started this company, it was a very interesting journey because I had never really been in the business world other than running my own practice and dealing with the slings and arrows of day-to-day practice and being a big women's health advocate and so forth. I've always seen disparities, but I didn't really think it was a professional disparity until I entered the business world. And I said, oh my goodness. And I just thought, if you did your homework, if you had a good grade, you would be promoted. And then next thing you know, I would pitch my product, I'd get standing ovations and then crickets. And I thought, wow, do I smell? Is there something wrong? Then the statistics started to come in front of me. And I honestly did not do my homework on those statistics, that the numbers were terrible. 2% of funding going to women. It wasn't 20, it wasn't 30, it wasn't 10, it was 2. So then I began to realize that, okay, I have to find those positions, like those residency slots that didn't just take women in as interns, graduate them. I needed to find those partners that would not just to listen to your story, take you in an incubator, give you advice, which you paid for, and then not give you money. And this is where I have found that there's no playbook. So part of my journey has been to be very vocal about this. I had no dog in this fight. I'm a 57-year-old surgeon. That this is my third child, right? This is my empty nest, so to say. It's gotten bigger than me. And I realize now the value of strategic partnership. You cannot scale a company like this on your own. You need help. But it's just so difficult because outside of my physicians who understand who my DNA is, male or female, they understand and support me as physician investors, it's going that next level that's challenging. So I think that that my feeling is that we need to be really transparent about this. We need to talk about this. We need to drop crumbs in the forest for the women behind us, because this journey is not about me. It's not about us individually. It's about what's the legacy going to be. Because if those surgical residents didn't graduate as chiefs in those programs, I couldn't start. If those women didn't graduate from co-ed institutions that started all male, I couldn't go to them. So we need to figure this out on the business side of things. And I think that the market disparity in business world made me also look at medicine. And then I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, medicine is 80% too. Sorry, ladies. All these physicians here were 80% too. So it doesn't just affect, and it's 80% across the whole country in every spectrum. But so it's a bigger issue. But I think specifically about how we mentor young entrepreneurs, how we get women to stick with their projects. Women succeed 2 times as well as men. We get harder questions. Even I noticed even in the pitches, if you notice carefully, some of our women entrepreneurs got stickier questions just in the chat. So we have it documented. So we really need to put a lens on this. And I don't know what the solution is. I just know that when we push through and plow through this system, we have to look back and honestly like evaluate how we got here, because we need more doors open and in order for women to get through them.
Yes, I think hopefully the tougher questions make us better.
Yes, but remember, we're not fighting to be 150%. There should be no expectation that a woman has to be better than everyone else and be in the top 2%. We're fighting for the middle.
Yes.
Yeah, and in fact, there are studies that recently came out that say that questions around for women are more towards their qualifications, and questions.
That got cut off.
I just saw that.
I was looking up some statistics, and here is what I found. Roughly only 8% of all Fortune 500 companies are led by women. Women only make up 47% of all women make up 47% of all employed adults, but they hold only 25% of computing roles. The ratio of men to women in engineering is 5:1, and only 5% of venture capitalists in the US are women, probably less. Only 2.8% of funding last year went to women-led startups, and half of all startups have no women in their executive team. So with that as a background, Amanda, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I just want to make sure I wasn't on mute. No, I really concur with what Michelle and Paula were sharing. I think absolutely with Michelle, there's some really nuts and bolts that were helpful along the way in just beginning to learn how to build a deck, share the idea, and as she noted, keep it simple, KISS. Because you can get so wrapped up in the anxiety it produces to have to go and sell your idea. Particularly for me, similar to probably Paula, coming from the clinical side, we aren't trained to sell anything. We aren't trained to market. As an ER nurse, I never really had to sell an IV. You need it. We're putting it in. So learning kind of the building blocks of how to really know your idea and believe in it, and how to sell it and portray the idea in simple terms, I think is absolutely dead on. And dropping those crumbs, I think, is really important, because I truly value the women networks that have been out there teaching me along the way, and not only just teaching me how to do this, but how to discard all of, I don't say the garbage, but what you really ironing out what you really need to know and what you really don't need to know. And what to really focus on, not being shy to knock on doors and knock on windows, but at the same time, being very specific at what you're asking, and respecting people's time, knowing we're all busy. Those were things that I learned and understood, but at the same time, really knowing our value and not being shy, and to value your time as a founder and spending it wisely. And knowing when it's okay not to attend this, but where are you best going to achieve what your goals for the next few weeks, few months are, and how to get there. I had some great advice. Don't give away your equity. You don't need to give away 8% for a 6-week program. There are women out there that want to teach you and want to give you that information. And so yeah, I'm happy to be here with hearing these other sentiments, because it's been fun, but it's been challenging. And one of the earliest things I heard was, well, you've just got to get comfortable with being in the red. And I thought, I'm definitely not comfortable being in the red, you know, and kind of just becoming more comfortable with that risk-taking position that you need to have a little bit, and balancing that out kind of with the calculation, the calculatory, the research, and you know, the assumptions that all of our work is producing, and the data we're using to support those assumptions. So I don't know, I'm proud to be here, and I hope that I'll be leaving breadcrumbs. I still feel like I'm picking others up, but.
Thank you so much. That was interesting. Soles, do you want to go next about being a health IT expert in this field?
Sure. So my first job was designing computer chips, where I was one of 6 women at a 300-person company office. And then I kind of moved. I went into medical school, but then I came back into IT and have been consulting with leadership company teams who are all men, incidentally. And it's been very interesting. I look like a young woman, whether or not my experience of what I've done in my career is that. That is how I'm perceived when I walk into a boardroom. And so for young entrepreneurs, especially young women, just like when you go into the doctor's office and you say, hey, I have stomach pain, and they say, it's probably cramps, honey. You know, that is the same type of situation that can happen in the boardroom. And it's up to you as a salesperson. Amanda, I love that. Like, learning how to sell yourself. That's my responsibility to say, no, I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to stand my ground here, and I'm going to challenge you on the things that I think your company needs to be challenged on. Now, that may result in me getting fired, and has, but other times it results in moving the needle forward. And so to young people coming up, I would say, don't be discouraged by the failures, by the firings, by the getting laid off. That is just part of the process of business. And those things are going to build your skill set, and then you'll be able to sit in a room and present to an executive board succinctly and clearly, and have everybody say, wow, you really know what you're talking about. That will come with experience, practice, tenacity. The other thing I will say, running a startup, my significant other ran a startup for 7 years that he grew to 30 people with profitability, and it was a full-scale manufacturing company. And he tells me Elon Musk's phrase of running a startup is like chewing glass and staring into the abyss. I think that is very accurate from what I've seen of his journey. It is nerve-wracking. There are lots at stake. You are helping people with their families and their jobs, their career. You're in there. But that's part of the joy of it, is like that you get to do something so influential. So just know everyone else is going through those same feelings that you're going through of, this is scary and hard, and maybe everybody here doesn't think I know what I'm talking about, but you do, and have confidence in that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Back to Shubra, you can probably take off with this comment on the chat. There's an interesting Harvard Business Review article that discusses the differences in questions that VCs tend to pose to male entrepreneurs versus female. Men are asked questions about hopes and achievements, whereas women are asked about potential losses and risks. VCs are comfortable investing in people who look like them and talk like them. So do you have comments on that?
It's super interesting. So we had a discussion once, a bunch of investors in the room, and we were talking about financial projections and how men and women present their financial projections differently. The reality is, when you're investing in an early stage company, we all know that these projections are our best guesses, our best educated guesses, even in the utmost honest conversations, which will probably not materialize in the exact same way as we are seeing them on the screen today, 5 years from now. So everyone knows that, but we typically say, when men are presenting financial projections, we as investors, the conclusion of our conversation in a nutshell was, If you have a white male presenting financial projections to you for an early stage startup, you should automatically give it a 30% cut to make it more realistic. And if you have a diverse woman, especially, or even any diverse entrepreneur, especially a woman, presenting financial projections, you should give it at least a 20% raise from what they're presenting. So that just goes to say that for those of us who have had the benefit of hearing pitches from a diverse set of entrepreneurs, we see how they overestimate or underestimate, or at least over communicate or under communicate. I think it happens at both of those levels, by the way. First is what they estimate of themselves, and then they add a 20% to that, or take off a 10% from that. Many women I talk to come from the mindset of, I want to be able to deliver on what I am promising. And if I don't live up to my word, then my reputation will be harmed. It really, they take it upon their conscience to be able to live up to their word. And men come from the perspective of, I need to be ambitious. I am putting my life and soul into this startup, and I want to take over the world. I want to be ambitious. And everyone knows that we're not committing to these projections. Things will go up or down. So even if I don't meet them, what's the big deal? It's not like everyone didn't already know that. So it's two different perspectives, right? And it's not necessarily honest or dishonest, but I think everyone's somewhere on that spectrum, and different people end up leaning to opposite sides of this spectrum. And this is something for all of us to be aware of, irrespective of what role we are playing within the healthcare ecosystem, or even any general entrepreneurial ecosystem. Because if you are a founder, then think about where you are leaning on, where you are on the spectrum, and adjusting accordingly. Because imagine it's hurting you in several stacked layers. First of all, you underestimated yourself. Then you undercommunicated that. And then imagine if you ended up being in a room full of VCs, which most rooms full of VCs are a bunch of white men who did not know any diverse entrepreneurs and took a 30% cut to what you presented. And because that's what they're used to doing, because all they hear from is pitches from white males all the time. Yeah. Right? So now imagine how much of a difference really is between what you could truly achieve to what you're being assessed at, and what the investment decision is being made at. So and for investors, we need to be aware that we should not be missing out on a good opportunity just because someone was not able to be pompous and toot their own horn and overcommit and overcommunicate. And we adjust our expectations accordingly and make investments that are grounded more in reality than just what we are being told.
Yeah, those are really good points. I just add just two things to that. One is, I remember when I first started my first company, and my attorney, I was giving him the projections, and he said, "Oh, well, you got to double it because they're going to cut it in half." And as a lawyer, that is not something I would have ever thought of and would ever do. I'm like, no, that's dishonest, And but his point was, at the time, and no one was doing it. This was 15 years ago. No one was doing legal tech. People didn't understand. So I think it also depends a lot on what the level of knowledge that your audience has about what you're doing. Because I can tell you, I see numbers and I know the models for most of the companies I see, because I'm a vertical specific, investment strategy, right? I know diagnostics and AI enabled diagnostics. So when somebody gives me numbers, I can very easily say, that sounds a little low. Why is that? Why are you not getting more here? Or that looks like it should be higher, or your valuation should be here, and I'll give them that information. Not all the guys won't give them that information. I'll tell them, you don't have a woman on your team at all. This looks, but you really just, and they've actually been very receptive. And it's probably not the smartest thing for me to do as a venture investor, because what most venture investors do is they don't want to tell you anything about why they think something or why something's wrong. They'll just make a point that in their mind, oh, that was wrong, and then cross, because they're looking, we see so 60, 80, 100 companies a month. You're looking for reasons to not make an investment. So I think that veracity is really important. Knowledge, you want to really establish your knowledge up front. I ended up creating an AI modeling tool for our intake flow. We're just finishing it now, which basically enables us to identified 72 data points that are relevant to what we invest in, and it analyzes them from people coming in, because I feel like that takes out the bias. That takes out a lot of, just exactly what you're saying. A lot of women come in and they don't touch on things. They undersell. And so I'll say, well, wait a minute, my scores are really high. Maybe she wasn't great at sales, but why am I not getting the same message from her presentation that the numbers are showing me that I should be getting? Similarly, if somebody comes in and doesn't speak English very well, I've had that happen so often. I'm used to being around people from all over the world. So I listen and I ask, and I can usually get it, but most people won't. And so if that person doesn't come across well, then that helps me to make sure I'm adequately giving them every opportunity to prove their case. And by the same token, you have some people that come in and they're just sales. You're like, oh my God, this person's so amazing. It's great. Oh, wait a minute. Like, these scores are really low. What are they not telling me that I need to know? And so I think it depends. You have to really gauge your audience. There are some super wicked smart people in investing. There are also some people that are not, and they think they are, maybe. But the key is you have to really know who you're presenting to, and make sure that you adjust your presentation to their level of knowledge. It's very easy to see what these people have invested in, and what they were able to find, or what they've written about, or things they've said that give you an indication that they know this area. If I see someone coming in who's a physician, or a population health specialist or something, I know they're going to be attuned to certain things. So I'm knowing that what they're telling me and their experience is valid, even if it's not something I validated myself, which I will do for pieces of information that I don't know. So I do think that's your point, Shubra, is very accurate in that women do undersell. We like to underdeliver and under promise and over deliver, right? It's a very popular thing, but you have to have confidence in your thing. I think the one thing that comes out to me is somebody is in the room and they're talking about what they're doing, and I know they know what they're doing in an instant. Right? I know it, I can feel it. And then it comes down to, what is the opportunity in the numbers? And do I think this person can get there? And what's their competitive advantage, right? Over everybody else.
Yeah, interesting, because we're running to the end of our session, and we can talk a whole day on this topic, and it's really interesting. A rapid fire round. I just wanted to ask each one of you to speak in one sentence. What would be the benefit of having more women entrepreneurs, more women investors into this field of health tech? So Michelle, you can start.
Benefit will be, if there's more investors like me, more people support investors like me, there's more women founders, statistically proven, more women on the boards, more diversity in the C-suite, and far better solutions.
Shubra, can you go ahead?
I would just quote some stats. Women-led funds with female partners are 2 times more likely to invest in startups with female founders. And startups with female founders are 2 times more likely to deliver in terms of results per dollar invested. So that's a 4x higher return if you have a woman investor making investment decisions on your team.
Thank you. Paula?
I think we need to change the narrative. I think that listening to how we don't perform, we're not confident enough, we're not clear enough, it doesn't make sense to me. If you think about how the symphony orchestra chooses their musicians, they have them play behind a screen. So they take out a lot of those inherent biases. And that can be challenged too, but I think that we need to at least push to the behind the screen, because I think just listening to the two ventures, there's already a huge amount of inherent bias about how a woman presents and how it comes across. And not to say that presenting is everything, because that's just the first step in like 20 steps. And you could have a fantastic presentation and make it all the way up, but at the end of the day, you're not writing checks to 98%, right, is going to men. So the presentation is just the start. The whole process has to be looked at. So I would just say the whole narrative really needs to change, and you have to change it at every level, not just how well do you present.
Amanda?
I think from the clinical side, we're 50% of the population, and we know that entrepreneurs and ideas are from people who know the problem inherently, produce better solutions. So better solutions, better health outcomes, cost savings.
Yeah. So Leitz, can you conclude it?
I think it's all been said. I mean, yes, women make a lot of really important perspectives that men don't have, and those are necessary to create innovative solutions, and this space is in desperate need of that.
Okay, thank you so much for all of you for taking the time to join this panel. I'm sure we should all meet again and continue this discussion. So we're a little bit behind schedule, so we'll continue the next set of pitches. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Pramila. Pleasure to be here.
Take care.
Thank you.
Well, hello. That was a great session. Thanks, Pramila, and the panelists, Michelle, Shubra, Solace, Paula, and Amanda. It's a wonderful discussion. Needs to be talked more. I'm Patty. I'm going to be your host for the next. Well, take you to the lunch. How's that? A digital lunch, as we'll have it. I think some people are in the office. We're going to start back on the agenda, or as Pramila said, we're about 4 minutes behind schedule, but we'll catch folks in. I think we're going back into the startup pitch round, and Shiva, I think you're up next. Joggle Health. Can you unmute? And yeah, there he is. Okay, Shiva, over to you.
Okay, start my video. Hi, thanks again. I'm Siva Nadaraja, President, co-founder of Jago Health. Hope you can see the screen. So 4 years ago, I met these two researchers from NYU and Manhattan College, who told me that they have developed a sensor and an AI-driven app that can treat stroke, cerebral palsy, chronic pain through telemedicine. So essentially, they said they have taken an existing technology that's only available in the larger hospitals and kind of democratize it by taking it to patients' home so that patients could be treated remotely. I got fascinated and I actually became an angel investor in the venture back in 2016, 2017. This is what they showed me. So this is essentially a wearable sensor that went into the body. Just you wear it like a watch for 45 minutes a day, and you play an app that is very much personalized for each patient. And there's also a virtual reality component to it. And you could basically ship this to a patient's home, and you can treat patients with stroke, cerebral palsy, and pain, and a bunch of other neuromuscular conditions. So the first patient was a soccer player in Boston who was having chronic low back pain, and he did not recover from, nothing worked for him, right? He was about to go on opioids, and he was not ready for that, and surgery was another option for him. With 8 weeks of Jago therapy purely at home, you could see him wearing the sensors. This patient fully recovered. Now he's back on the field playing soccer. Another patient in Atlanta who had stroke post a brain surgery, who did not recover from regular physiotherapy or partially recovered from physiotherapy. We treated him remotely, and now he's playing golf and driving. Another patient here in New Jersey who had Bell's palsy or facial paralysis could not smile for 17 years. She smiled for the first time after Jago therapy. Another patient in India, a teacher, a school teacher, who was told, you know, you cannot lift your grandchild because you will leak. This is urinary incontinence that she was having. She could not stand up and teach, cannot write on a board because she would leak. And incontinence is pretty common. In India, it's 1/3 of, post-pregnant and elderly women have incontinence. We treated her with 8 sessions of Jago. Now she's back essentially teaching. She gave a very beautiful talk the other day saying that now she's able to, at least lift or carry her grandchild. Then the story why I am at Jago started with this little girl. 13-year-old child in India, my friend's daughter. She had cerebral palsy and somebody had to carry her to the bathroom every day. You can imagine a 13-year-old carrying dad or mom carrying her to the bathroom. We treated her with Jago remotely from here in the US. Now with some support, she's able to walk to the bathroom by herself. And that's when I decided Jago is bigger than I thought. And I joined the company and we lifted the company out of NYU labs and brought it to the market just before the pandemic. I want to show you a video of a child who recently recovered. This is again in India, a child who's taking his first step after Jago treatment. So this child was told he would never walk. He has cerebral palsy. We treated him, a 4-year-old child. You could see the smile in his face when he's taking his first step after getting treated with Jago therapy. So you could see that the impact something like this could make, where cerebral palsy treatment actually is only available in some of the best treatments are only available in some of the larger hospitals. Now we have taken it to every corner of the world through this platform where it's very mobile and can be treated with telemedicine. So how does Jago work? Jago uses the science of neural plasticity, your own brain's ability to rewire. So let's take a stroke or cerebral palsy, for example. You have a blood clot or your brain gets damaged and your brain has now forgotten how to control the muscles. By retraining your brain with Jago, by wearing that sensor in the hand and playing that very specific game that's developed for each patient, you can actually rewire your brain with neuroplasticity, and you could get the control back slowly. It's a long process for certain. It's typically for stroke patients, it's about 3 to 6 months, but for chronic pain, it's just 8 weeks, depending on the condition. So then we looked at the literature of what Jago could actually treat. But remember, this is an old science that is currently being democratized, right? Jago could treat in 4 different areas. Urology, it can treat incontinence, premature ejaculation. It can treat vulvovestibulitis, pelvic pain in women, strokes, cerebral palsy, neurology. In pain, it can treat cancer, chronic low back pain, cancer pain, chronic low back pain, and migraine. And in gastro, it can treat dysphagia, dysynergic defecation, or chronic constipation, and fecal incontinence. So these are the areas that there is enough data in the literature that it can treat, and it's a $550 billion market that Jago could go after. So the first thing we did was we partnered with the Harvard Medical School. We're an East Coast company, and we partnered with them with Brigham and Women's Hospital to study chronic low back pain. So right now there is a trial going entirely virtual where patients are getting treated for chronic low back pain through Jago. And we also got into the Johnson & Johnson Innovation J Lab. So now we are part of the UPenn's Pennovation Lab. We get, again, remember, this is only a 12 to 18-month-old company right now after we launched just before the pandemic. So we have access to Johnson & Johnson scientists, and they like the science, and they took us in for their J Labs program. We got a patent. It has about 18 claims in the patent, primarily in the machine learning and AI part of it and the digital signal processing of the whole technology. Voila, we also got FDA clearance. So how did this happen, right? So we went to FDA soon as, pretty much in 2019, and asked them, how would you classify Jago? So they looked at the science of Jago. They've known this science it's there for a very long time because they have seen enough machines in the past. And they said, you guys actually fall under this particular category and it's exempted from FDA for 510K. So they gave us an exemption, 510K exemption to go to market. So we can actually sell this in the US that we got cleared by FDA. So the medical advisory board is primarily from Harvard and Yale. So Dr. Lazardo is one of the leading pain researchers. Asamina Lazardo is at Harvard and Tufts. Dr. Sena is from Yale, celebrated neurologist, and also Dr. Edwards from Harvard Medical School. He's also one of the leading pain researchers in the world. And so you could see that neurology and pain is where most of our advisory board is, and also Dr. Theva is on the urologist side. So a team is essentially Gordon Silverman, Dr. Gordon Silverman. He's the one who really worked originally with Dr. Joseph Bradney. The name comes from these two gentlemen, Joseph and Gordon. That's where Jago comes from. So Sanjay and Gordon worked for almost 9 years to develop this out of the lab. And then I joined, and we brought in Deb from Pfizer as a financial officer, and Maria from FDA to get us through the FDA clearance. So I have about 20 years in pharmaceutical industry. Jago is actually my second venture. I sold my previous venture. It's an AI-driven drug safety platform, which currently is used to monitor the vaccine side effects. It's sold to IQVIA, one of the world's leading clinical research organization. That's where I was leading the AI business, and I joined Jago. That's how I ended up at Jago after I became an angel investor in the beginning. So our business model is virtual first. So as I told you, patients receive a kit that's sent home, and then the treatment happens over telemedicine. But also patients have an option to come to a doctor's office and get treated if they wanted to. So we have a couple of partnerships or affiliated clinics now popping up in the US. Our competition is primarily Hinge Health on the back pain. So Hinge Health is a company which uses very similar technology, but a different technology, but similar methodology of delivery. They are currently valued at about $3 billion. They treat only lower back pain. They're very successful. We compete with them on the pain, chronic pain, lower back pain side, but we have 21 other indications. They did not go through the FDA route. We went through the FDA route and got it cleared through FDA. They are directly to employers. We are going through Medicare. We are also currently covered by Medicare, but they are one of our largest competitors in the pain space, in the low back pain, but we have other conditions.
Hey, Shiva.
Yes.
You're past your 10 minutes. You have about 4 minutes for questions. So get to an end. Maybe just have there some questions.
This is my last slide. Yes. Yeah. Great. So the technical viability of what we're doing with Charm, we need an API. We're building an API so that the cloud data that is coming from the sensor could be put into the Charm cloud. We also need a scheduling dispatching system within Charm, where currently we are using Charm for scheduling telehealth and in clinics and at home. And also we need an API where the data could be pushed into the hospital system so doctors can view the reports that's coming out at Jago. So that is my presentation. So we'll go to the questions, Patty.
Great, thanks Shiva. Jago Health, and I see one from Jill already on chat. And since it was only addressed to the panelists, I'll just talk it out here. How's the AI program determined?
Right, so it's machine learning more than AI at this point. Although we have a patent for the AI, we currently the platform uses only machine learning. Existing data that is being collected over a period of time on stroke patients and cerebral palsy patients is used for predicting the better treatment pathway for the patient, right? Let's say your patient comes up with incontinence. We have treated similar patients, or the literature has enough data on how similar patients have been treated with this older modality or machines. And we take that old data, and when also we use the data that we're currently generating, and we're essentially coming up with predictions. So what is the best treatment pathway for the patient? So that's basically how our patent covers and also we use in our system.
Great. Judges, other questions you can ask on Zoom as well or on chat? Other judges?
Hey, this is Yuli Cheripalli. Hey, great presentation, good technology. Do you have any clinical data on this? Like any pilot studies or?
Yes, like yes. So as I said, we went to FDA without data. and they actually exempted us, but now we are starting the study. So the first data that's coming out of is from the Harvard study on chronic low back pain. It's a small study right now, 80 patients. So the one that we have basically says patients are having a 70 to 80% improvement in pain reduction without opioids. So that is one data. We have another study conducted a while ago on cancer pain patients. That basically shows when two control groups, patients are having about 60% reduction in pain. These are cancer patients, while they're also on opioid, where the opioid patients' cancer pain went up. And on the incontinence side, we are seeing 9 out of 10 patients. These are all studies. Incontinence is about 100 patient study. 9 out of 10 patients are avoiding surgery. And we have only case studies and smaller case studies currently peer reviewed. These studies are not being peer reviewed yet, but we're generating enough data. So the only control study of the cancer and also for the chronic low back pain. Yeah.
Great. Go ahead.
Sorry, second question. Do you have any plans to go to FDA to get to become like a digital therapeutic?
That's our pathway, yes. So we're going to we already had a couple of meetings with FDA. So we are going to go through a digital therapeutic pathway. First, we are going to get for chronic low back pain. We're meeting with them in a month's time. And then fibromyalgia is the second one. That's our pathway to get specific indications on the digital therapeutic side, yes.
So we're out of time, but Jill does have a question. Shiva, may I ask you to just kind of respond to her on chat? She's asking about cost and insurance coverage and
Sure.
kind of related to business model.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Let's give a virtual round of applause to Shiva and Jago Health. And I'm on Clubhouse very often these days, and it's audio only, so no one can see your expressions. But they use the mute button to actually clap, right? So you mute, unmute, mute, unmute. So I learned something that in Clubhouse. So thank you. Next up, and we'll go right to our next startup, VTitan, Prasad Maganti. If you're with us, get ready, and you're a telecardiac care using a wearable heart patch. Very interesting. Over to you, Prasad.
Thank you, Paddy. On behalf of VTitan, I would like to thank the Charm Innovation Challenge team for giving us an opportunity to showcase our products and solutions to the distinguished gathering here. Before we dive into the telecardiac care, I want to draw your attention to a few significant healthcare trends that are shaping the healthcare today and tomorrow. First is a trend of wearable devices to monitor the health parameters continuously, 24/7 literally. These devices are finding consumer acceptance rapidly, and especially in the wellness segment. As we all know, smartwatches are leading the pack here. We expect wearable devices to become a commonplace in the near future. Though many of these wearable devices may not be clinical grade devices approved by the FDA right now, the market will get there sooner than later. Second is a trend of more devices are being added to the homes as part of home health care. We have blood pressure monitors, glucometers. They have been around for quite some time. Now sleep monitors are the new addition, and COVID has added pulse oximeters to the list. So even self-diagnostic test kits are now part of home health care. So where patients can test and have results instantly. So there's a lot of health data that is being generated. Third trend is that home Wi-Fi, 5G internet, and mobile app platforms are making it easy to connect these wearables and home health devices to the cloud. A new category of innovative care solutions are coming up, delivering real-time data to the caregivers now. And fourth is that more and more caregivers are preferring the remote patient monitoring as part of long-term patient care and engagement, and also part of chronic chronic disease management. So even the current pandemic situation triggered by COVID has accelerated these trends and making remote patient care not an option but a necessity. Okay? So while there's a lot of health data that is being generated, through the wearable devices and home health devices. This data is not available to the caregivers seamlessly for making clinical decisions. Of course, there's also reluctance on part of the caregivers to rely on patient-generated data due to the non-adherence to the clinical standards, etc. But I think it's before it's not a very long time before this longitudinal patient-generated data will also find its place in the clinical decision making. The issue with the patient-generated data is that it's voluminous. However, the AI tools are making this easy to parse the data and identify patterns and generate meaningful clinical insights. Coming to the VTitan wearable patch, the challenge is that the arrhythmia is a major concern in the cardiac care. Arrhythmia is the irregular beating of the heart. Sometimes heart beats too fast, sometimes too slow, and sometimes heart skips the beats. And there are lots of types of arrhythmia, and atrial fibrillation is the most common type of arrhythmia. Arrhythmia can cause blood clots, stroke, and heart failures and other heart-related conditions if it's not treated in time. This is a condition that occurs intermittently, and it makes very difficult to capture these in the regular patient visits. So this requires continuous monitoring over long periods of time. So this is what the VTitan wearable patch addresses. So the patient population we are looking is the elderly population where there's a significant incidence of cardiovascular diseases. And as per the American Heart Association, at least 2.7 million Americans are living with this atrial fibrillation condition. And this is just US, and take it to the world, there's a whole population which is having arrhythmia related conditions which needs to be addressed and in real time. So the solution we are proposing is that a small, discrete, comfortable patch that can be worn on the chest during your normal day-to-day activities and during the sleep. Okay, and ECG patch use case scenarios we are addressing are the remote care setting where the patient is at home and is advised to wear the ECG patch for continuous cardiac monitoring. And this is a typical telecardiac situation where it can be offered by the independent practitioners who are managing the patients closely, or even the telecare service providers who are now running a larger groups where they onboard the patients and deliver telecardiac care. Second is the ambulatory setting where the patient puts on the ECG patch for a short interval of 5 to 10 minutes or even 15 minutes as part of routine cardiac screening at the point of care. This is basically the risk group screening which happens at the point of care, and typically for age more than 45 and 50 and things like that. And third is a hospital setting where patients post any surgery, they are put on the patch so that as long as they are inside the hospital and there's a care that is being monitored, the patient heart condition is monitored closely. So these are the three use case scenarios. And also the new use case scenario that is coming up is the home health care, where the care staff, the care providers themselves visit the homes and then measure the patient vitals. And this is again, this kind of patch will be a great useful tool for such service providers. The solution works like this. The patient experiences heart flip-flops or skips or fast heartbeats. The patient is asked to wear the ECG patch for monitoring. And the data gets moved to the patient, data moves to the mobile app, which is a typical mobile which the patient has. And there's a continuous data collection on the mobile side using the pairing with the patch. And the data that is collected is algorithms are applied on it, and the data is extracted, the waveform is analyzed, and data is extracted, the intervals are extracted, and alert conditions are generated, and they are pushed to the ECG, the CharmHealth side of the EHR. The typical parameters we monitor are the ECG rhythm. The recorded ECG wave itself is captured and converted into a PDF and an image and sent to the cloud. And the heart rate variability, the ECG intervals, the respiration rate. And we also apply algorithms to detect the tachycardia, bradycardia, the atrial fibrillation, other kind of conditions. If you look at the competition, there are traditional players who provide this Holter probe kind of monitors, where basically they are shipped to the patient and they have a huge storage, and then patient wears them for 7 days, 14 days or longer. And the patient ships back the device to the provider, and there's analysis of the data. They don't support any kind of a real-time monitoring or a remote monitoring as the patient experiences a discomfort. And newer players are coming up with remote monitoring features, but EHR integration is missing, and there's a 360 view of the data is missing. The care providers, the patient, the device all plugged and connected together, that is missing. This is where we play, and with the tighter integration with the EHR platforms like Charm, we will be able to deliver a better solution to the our customers. So with the Charm EHR integration, the VTitan can offer remote cardiac monitoring solution to the telecardiac providers and ambulatory practices by seamlessly fetching the data from the patient device into the EHR, so that care team can access the patient vital data and alerts in the real time for better patient care. The APIs we have worked on, we have actually built a demo for this, prototype for this, and we have used some of these APIs to push the data to the Charm EHR. A typical the waveform that is captured in the mobile app looks like this, and we capture the data for 15 minutes interval and then push it to the Charm EHR. The patient also has an option of clicking a button on the app and then pushing the data to the Charm EHR. And also, whenever this alert condition exists, the alert condition has been detected, the data gets automatically shared to the Charm EHR along with the parameters at that time. This is how the data looks in the Charm EHR. The Charm EHR flow sheet captures the data, the moving data, time-stamped, longitudinal data, where the heart rate, RR interval, QTC, all these things are captured. This is how the ECG image that is uploaded to the Charm EHR will look like. The patient, the care provider can review it and then write his comments and sign it off. So coming to us, so VTitan is a medtech company based out of Chennai, and we are involved in design and development of medical devices. And we started with a patent in the infusion space, a highly accurate way of infusing the IV into the patients, and we have patent there. And we started there and slowly moved to ICU monitoring space, and also now we are building products for the home health care and the wearable devices. So today's EHRs mostly deal with the data that is collected once patient steps into the office, and are not equipped to deal with the patient-generated data before or after the patient visit. We are happy to note that CharmHealth is taking the innovative step of making its platform open and available for device vendors like VTitan for integration of various kinds of patient data into its EHR, so that clinicians can access the data and gain insights on the patient health even when they are outside the clinics and hospitals.
Great. Thanks, Prasad, for the great presentation of VTitan. Judges, questions?
Hi, this is Solace. I'm a bit confused. How is this? Is this going to be used for like an RPM company that's doing 24/7 monitoring? I'm just confused, like kind of if this is for, you know, detection of arrhythmias, where then we make interventions that are non-urgent. We already have pretty robust solutions in place for that. And then if it's for detection of things that are urgent, we would need notifications, and that would require somebody to be logged into Charm all the time. So where does your product sit?
Yeah, so once the data moves to the Charm platform, from there you can move to the apps and other places where the data can be pushed as alerts to the doctor's apps. So that way, the notification engine of the Charm itself, we are leaning on the Charm to deliver the notifications to the care providers. So the critical alerts will be pushed to the doctor directly through the Charm platform.
other questions for Prasad? I don't see any questions on the chat, Prasad. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you,
So before we get on to our next startup, I wanted to throw, and Prasad, if you can unshare your, yeah, thanks. To throw a trivia at the group. So Charm Innovation Health Channel, we're on Zoom and we have a lot of participants I see at the bottom. But trivia, the question is, which all platforms are streaming the Innovation Challenge live? Would anyone like to venture the answer? No one? I see Zoom. I see answers in chat. Maybe you can speak it out. So I see Zoom, Boba, Clubhouse, and chat. That is correct. So we're live on Clubhouse under the Human Behavior Club. And for those who don't know Clubhouse, it's a new social media, audio only. And we're streaming live so they can hear us there too. We're part of the Human Behavior Club in there. We had a lot of engagement in the morning, like 200 people listening in to the keynote, Michelle's keynote and Pramila's opening remarks. And I was there and then came here. So I don't know how it's going there. But yeah, now I think YouTube and Facebook, the usual suspects, via Jago Health. Thank you, Shiba. And so this is truly a digital event, right? So obviously we're on Zoom, but we're broadcasting to the world or to the globe in different mediums. So I think the way information is consumed and broadcast is changing. So great. Let's move on to our next startup. So I think Shrikant from Velat, you're from overseas, so maybe the first overseas presenter today. But over to you, Shrikant and Velat.
Thank you. Thank you, Patty. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah, hi, everyone. This is Shrikant on behalf of Wealth. Thanks to iValley and CharmHealth for giving the platform to discuss our solution. So we are in the early traction stage of our product in the preventive health screening. That is our target. So the goal of Wealth, as the name suggests, is to make wellness and health easy, engaging, and probably enjoyable also. That's the goal of health. Specifically targeted towards the target group in the age band of 25 to 45, the millennials, so to say, where the need for preventive health has tremendous value. As the saying goes, that stitch in time saves 9. So that let me just dive into what we set out to do. So myself, we founded Wealth a few years back along with a physician co-founder. He's also my namesake. He couldn't join because of the time zone issues. But yeah, we'll go through the presentation right away. Yeah. Okay, the problem that we are talking about is in the space of preventive health. I mean, we all know what is preventive health, how do we prevent it? We have all the ideas, but how to make it happen, right? I mean, that's the real challenge, because that's where it's also a behavioral issue, and especially it comes under a larger umbrella of metabolic health risk, and which broadly we all know about the problem of blood pressure, diabetes, and all that, but there are also other issues. Metabolic syndrome issues causes things like stroke, kidney problems, etc. And there are the incidence of this affecting the younger generation is also increasing, actually. In general, people want to kind of a little wary of discussing about the health status. So that's what we set out to kind of correct it. to make it a little easy for people to discuss it and make it also enjoyable in that process. So we started by building the product. The inspiration was essentially an ATM. An ATM for health is what we started out to do. So the product that we initially came up with after the initial MVP is, we call it the Health Track, which does multiple measurements which are clinical grade, all in one kind of thing. It's like a kiosk, which is essentially self-service option, and the entire electronics and the software, everything was built in-house, and it was clinically validated as per the international conventions, and it was put out in the market. We also added a few sensors along the way. We removed a few. Essentially, effectively, we removed the smoking sensor because there was not much demand for it. And last year we added the COVID screening guard actually. So it's a mix of both invasive and non-invasive sensors, which we have bundled it into one form factor. We have actually come up with a new form factor, which I will discuss subsequently. Now, just moving on. Yeah, this is a bit about our company history. We are currently operational only in India. And from 2017 onwards, we started doing pilots. We got our patents and design registrations, etc. done. And in 2019, we got ISO certified 13485, which is for medical devices. And since on, we've had about 5,000 odd paying users. And the key metric we look forward to is what is called the repeat users, which is indicative of stickiness. And that is 30% is considered a pretty good number in general. And you had largely the users are in the age band of, like I said, 25 to 40. And we provide them both the user product as well as also avail of some services around that. Very recently, as of last month, we got seed funded. That gave us the impetus to develop the digital components because there was always a need to kind of couple it with the digital needs, which is useful for the millennials, etc. And that is something that is underway. We built the cloud solution, but now we are converting it into an app, and which is already being tested right away. So just to summarize, the clinical validations have been done on the product. The FDA approval has just been started. We have appointed a consultant so that they will help us take us through the FDA process. And that's where we are going on. So the seed fund raise happened, like I said, just recently, and we also had a couple of other accolades from the government side also. And now coming, so this is what kind of helped us look at the markets outside also. So my co-founder is based in Singapore because he's board certified, American board certified cardiologist. He has a good idea of the dynamics of the American market. So we are looking to see if, whether we can enter the market over here. That's really where we are. So the approach that we have taken, that at least there are two broad segments that we are looking at. One is basic. Yeah, yes.
Your 10 minutes is up. Just wrap up quickly so that we have some time. I already see some questions, but just wrap up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, we have two segments, which is basically for the physician patient screening for higher productivity, and another one is for the preventive care. Actually, there we are providing what is called as a group therapy concept, which I'll just quickly rush through. And all the solution that we are providing is FHIR compliant, actually. So this is the tabletop model that we are talking about. And we have a couple of IITs and AIMS that are working with us to improve the product as we speak. So the digital part actually consists of 3 levels of care. Actually, one is the guided care, which is self-care. We have built about 100 odd conditions, which are based on which are non-emergent and non-trivial conditions, which will get support, which will be which can be inquired and used for patient education. And then there is something called as a evidence-based group therapy that we provide, which has been very successful. We did it for a group of expecting mothers, and that kind of worked out very well, and which is what gave us the impetus to later on launch the digital part of it. We also provide, the app can also support one-on-one support if required. But essentially, we talk about the group therapy concept, where the registered medical practitioner or the counselor, whatever it is, they spend the time on it without having to repeat these things, and the sense of community comes in when we build, provide this solution. So this is the screenshot, which is in multi-language. You can add it in Spanish or whatever as it exists. This is the roadmap for now. We are looking to set up a US entity. We have a person on board who's based out of Florida to help us set up the company. And we are looking to get Series A funding down the line. So this is the team. So just quickly, I should say that 1/3 of the workforce is women, including one of the directors. Otherwise, you see the doctor there, and the others are all engineers over here. So it's clearly a interdisciplinary team that we have built. And these are the contacts, just in case anyone needs to reach out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shrikant, and my faux pas on keeping time. I think you were not up on time when I interrupted, so I apologize for that. But you're right on time now, so over to the judges. I have some questions already going on the chat since it scrolls. Let me just scroll back, and Shrikant, if you can read some of the questions from Solace and Hari. When somebody's detected COVID positive, how do you sanitize the system before it can be used by another healthy person? And Solace kind of follows up, and where is the system currently being used?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So currently, since ours was obviously touch-based system, we have changed it to include voice-based activation also. But right now, the sanitization also, we also have a UV-based add-on thing, which will kind of sanitize the stuff, which is 99.9% sanitization effective. But otherwise, if there is any nurse or anybody around, they can obviously provide the service about that. So that's where it really is there. And we are hoping that the voice activation, voice recognition, etc., will make it a little easier. And we are working on some of these aspects also. Yeah, especially the blood components like HB1AC measurement and all that will obviously need some amount of involvement. Spot test, etc. That'll definitely need that.
So where is the system being used? Like, does it go into doctor's offices or at home, or I'm a bit confused about that.
No, this is meant for use in physician clinics, as well as places where health camps can be used, etc. So right now, system that we have come up with is a portable solution. So you can put it, you can just set it up in your doctor's office, or it can be used at health camps also. So right now that is, and it's an integrated system. Think of it like a Swiss knife army, which has multiple parameters, multiple sensors, which is all clinical grade. That's what it is actually. And the virtual components, the digital component will kind of layer onto that so that the users can benefit and also interact with the physician where required. And the current installations are only in India and in Singapore right now. Okay, any other questions?
I don't see any in chat. Any other questions for Velat and Shrikant? Thank you, Shrikant. I know it's late your time, but I appreciate you joining us and presenting and talking about your company. We're kind of midway in our segment, the second segment, right after the first break. So I'd encourage people, if you're sitting in front of your computer, maybe just stand up, walk around a little bit. We have one more startup to go and a couple of talk sessions before we break for lunch. And it's back to back. So just get the blood flowing, attention flowing. So having said that, Art Wallace from Adapir, thank you for sharing already. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm Art Wallace. I'm the CEO of Adapir, and I am a cardiac anesthesiologist at the University of California, San Francisco. And we're going to talk about a new class of monitors that we've developed called AVDM. Our team, I'm the CEO, and I've done a number of projects. I developed the ECOM cardiac output monitor, the off-pump cabbage, perioperative beta blockade, and a number of other products. Shannon Haley, Adam Lestrange, Derek Tan, Bill Katz, Mike Bernstein. And what we're talking about today is a problem I've been trying to solve for a long time. When I was a resident, I was called to a code at 3 o'clock in the morning at a major hospital you've heard of. And there was a 12-year-old girl who had come in for oral surgery, and someone decided that she'd be more comfortable in the hospital overnight. At 2 o'clock in the morning, a nurse came in, didn't want to wake the child, gave her a shot of morphine, and at 3 a.m. she was found dead next to her mother. This code disturbed everyone. It destroyed people's careers. And I've seen it over and over again. Young people who are in the hospital, who no one thinks need cardiac monitoring, end up getting opiates and then stop breathing in the middle of the night. And as an anesthesiologist, I recommend all of you do chronic breathing every day. This happens remarkably frequently. About a third of all US deaths occur in the hospital. That's 715,000 cardiac arrests a year. It's about 0.5% of all surgical patients. And if you think about this, suppose a mid-sized airplane flew from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and when it landed, one of the people were dead. That's what we're talking about. It's 0.5% of surgical patients. 97% of these events are thought to be preventable, and 40% occur on unmonitored wards. These are people who are thought to be healthy, they don't need monitoring, and they're just found dead in bed. And it's interesting, ICUs, which have sicker people, actually have better results because people were monitored. When I was a kid, I watched Star Trek, and the Starship Enterprise would enter the orbit around a planet, and Captain Kirk would say, "Scan for life." And I always thought, well, how would you do that? How would you actually scan for life? And we all know that you can use the Hubble telescope to look across 100 light years of space to look at a planet and analyze the atmosphere of that planet to see if an alien is farting, but we can't look across a hospital room and see if a patient is breathing. The other thing that I get asked a lot is they say, can you get rid of all the wires? This is what we do to patients now. We tether them with wires. We put little sticky pads on their skin. We send the nurses in to stick those sticky pads back on. This technology was developed in the 1960s for the space program to see if the astronauts were alive. We haven't really advanced our monitoring since the 1980s. And patients, nurses, everybody wants this to go away. The other thing with COVID, going in to put one of these sticky pads back on requires putting on PPE, a respirator, and all the rest of it. So the question is, can you get rid of the wires? And what Adapir has developed is a remote, non-contact, touch-free smart monitoring system, which uses machine vision to monitor heart rate, respiratory rate, and pulse oximeter. There's nothing on the patient. We don't touch the patient. You don't have to hear anything to them. And we can also monitor other parameters. Last year, we developed a measure of perfusion. We're working on an algorithm for blood pressure. We can detect strokes, out of bed alarms, vomiting, aspiration. And we're using machine vision to create a new class of monitor. And what this is a camera array that has an RGB monitor camera, an IR camera, and a 3D depth camera, which allows us to identify the patient in the room, track them around the room, look through their clothes and blankets, and measure at the current time heart rate, respiratory rate, and saturation with nothing on the patient. The other thing we can do is we can integrate this into the electronic healthcare system. And when we look at how long it takes to have a patient have a cardiac event, it's about 12 hours. So nurses and doctors are ignoring people as they slide into a disaster, and that slide takes about 12 hours. The other thing about Adapere is we're not a device company. We don't have to develop any electronics. We use OEM camera arrays. There are multiple manufacturers of these camera arrays. We've used all of them. And these allow us to not be a hardware company, but rather a software company, which allows agile, rapid, low-cost development. So we don't rely on sensors touching the patients. We don't have to go and send a nurse to stick a sensor on the patient. We don't have to have it misapplied or fall off. The patients are untethered. There are no batteries. There's nothing to clean. You don't have to worry about, did they contaminate the wires? We reduce waste. And then we can integrate our system into the smart monitoring and provide this for early warning of cardiac arrests. Now, what's the market for this? Current monitors cost about $30,000 per bed. We can manufacture this electronics for about $1,000 a unit. And then we have a subscription to give them upgraded algorithms, and we can develop an algorithm each year. And then we also monitor for them. At the current time, there's 5,600 hospitals in the United States with about 900,000 beds. There's 15,000 nursing homes with 1.7 million beds. And if anything COVID has taught us, being in a nursing home and not being monitored is a sure way to have an unpleasant event. The initial sales potential at $2,000 a bed is a $5.2 billion market. And we're going to pursue FDA 510K Class 2 device approval. What's our other market? We look at the hospital and nursing homes. We upgrade current monitor capabilities, reduce false alarms, allow billing for monitored beds for all patients. I think if you're in a hospital, we should know if you're alive or dead, and we should monitor you. This also allows you to augment nursing staff ratios, reduce call alarms, and also do out-of-bed alarms very, very simply. There's also an in-home health market for older people who want to stay at home and be monitored, and they can just walk up to the monitor and we can immediately monitor them. That's the competition. Xerox and Philips have worked in this space, but they don't know how to make a pulse oximeter this way, and they don't really know how to do clinical testing, at least. And Adapere's advantage is we've already developed multiple monitors. We developed the ECOM monitor, a near-infrared spectrophotometer, an AVD distraction system, and we have an experienced team for clinical testing and development. We're the only non-contact pulse oximeter out there. We have the team that can develop these and test it clinically. We have good clinical rapport because I work in a hospital every day. I know exactly what people need. We're familiar with end users. And it's a software company to avoid development costs. We have OEM electronics. We have integration. We're going to have integration with electronic medical records. And this market is going to grow. And if you think you're going to be in a hospital without monitors 10 years from now, that's not going to happen. Our biggest limitation is marketing expertise, and we have to get our 510K approval. So the current status, we have remote monitoring of heart rate, respiratory rate, and saturation. We're working on algorithms for perfusion, blood pressure, stroke, pain, nausea and vomiting, and others. We're working with version 3 electronics. We have IRB approval for clinical testing by both UCSF and the VA R&D. We're doing clinical testing in healthy subjects, and we have a freedom to operate and a filed patent. Our next step is to do optimization against blood gases, which is required for 510K application, and we have the funding to do that. And then we will come on the market as a 510K Class 2 device. We've filed our patents, we filed a provisional patent, and we're working on algorithms and converting the software to the clinical unit. And we're working on algorithms for stroke, vomiting, aspiration, out-of-bed alarms, patient turn call systems, stroke, perfusion, and blood pressure. We also have smart alarms and an early warning system. This is the system in operation. This is me lying on a gurney. It identifies me in the room. It looks through my clothes and gets my respiratory rate. Look through a blanket because it's using infrared, and it works in the dark. This is a picture of me in the dark, and it finds me perfectly fine because it's using infrared. This is looking across my messy office and looking at a patient, identifies the target for measuring respiratory rate and blood pressure. And it's interesting, we were worried that excessive melanin in the skin would make it hard to measure. This engineer has a significant amount of melanin and we can see right through it. In infrared, you don't have to worry about it. And you're seeing here an infrared signal, a blue, a green, and a red. The sort of large lump is a breath, so we can count the respiration. The small stuff is the heart rate, and that allows us to get the heart rate. Then we can look across the room, track the middle of the forehead, and get pulse oximetry. We calibrate that. That pink light coming out of it is just an infrared image to let you see what the camera is doing. It's projecting infrared on the patient. How well does this work? This is a desaturation. We're tracking it. We track it actually faster than a normal pulse oximeter because our target area is fed by the internal carotid artery. So we get faster signals than a peripheral on the finger. Now, how good do you have to be to get it? Yep.
So we're over our 10 minutes, but if you can wrap up quickly, we have a few questions coming down in the chat panel already.
How good do you have to be? You have to have a root mean squared less than 4%. We're at 1.5, so we can get FDA approval. And we're looking for Series A funding. And that will pay for engineers, the FDA approval, and patent fees. Are there any questions?
We have a few. Thank you, Art, for a lovely presentation. You've triggered some interest. If I can combine a couple of questions here, I think Aditi wants to know if there's an opportunity to direct-to-consumer sale, and related, Pramila was asking, can it be used for life signs in dangerous areas, accidents and stuff?
Yes, you can use this at the home. These systems, the software, person just walks up to it, we identify the patient, find the right target areas. It's all automatic, and you can get them while people standing. We can look through people's clothing, which was kind of shocking to me, and measure without, because it's infrared. Can you use this in disaster areas? Yes, the military needs this to identify whether a soldier in the field is alive or not. You can use a telescope, aim at the patient, and get the answer. So that's a very useful way to do it.
Yeah, on that, I think Solace has a question around privacy. So how do you deal with privacy concerns, especially when you're recording things?
We're not recording anything. We're watching. And this is, like any video camera, it's watching. We're not recording anything. If you want to do video chat between the nurse and the patient, which is an important thing during COVID, you can turn on the video and watch the person to see how they're doing. So in a hospital, it's standard to have this. It's my opinion that every hospital room will have a video system after COVID, because being able to talk to patients is essential and see what they're doing. The other thing I would say is that as a doctor, I go see every patient that I get a call for. And the reason is because you learn a lot looking at the person. You immediately recognize whether they're septic or what's going on. And if a doctor can see that thing, they look sick, we can put that in a machine vision algorithm and identify the problem.
Art, this is Yuli Cheripalli. Quick question. We know that this technology has existed for a while. What do you think were the barriers, and how do you think you are going to overcome that?
I've developed a lot of algorithms over the years. When I developed the ECOM cardiac output monitor, people said, "Oh, this doesn't work. We don't know how to do this." I think differently about stuff. I test things. The reason the ECOM cardiac output monitor works is I made 100 chronically instrumented pigs, changed their cardiac outputs, and then we did 264 humans with flow probes on their aortas. And so I'm used to doing extensive clinical testing and algorithm development. That's not a standard skill set. And I think that's why people have a problem. They're not used to developing algorithms. I've worked with a number of companies that had trouble developing an algorithm because they weren't used to applying machine learning, applying artificial intelligence, and doing extensive testing and development.
Okay.
Any other questions for Art? Fascinating presentation and fascinating device. we have maybe just another minute, maybe one more question. Let me monitor the chat group. I think there are a couple of questions Art on chat. What are the error margins? Can this penetrate walls in a senior living facility? It's able to get the blood pressure that's comparable to a cuff. So kind of error margin related question.
You can't look through a wall. You have to be able to see the person. The blood pressure measurement, once we calibrate, we're doing a 100-patient study now to see how accurate it is. We're within about 10% of a normal blood pressure measurement. And that's pretty good, because what we're trying to do is say, hey, go look at that patient. We're not trying to get a perfect answer. What we're trying to do is say, this person's in a room, no one's watching them. You should go look at them and see what's wrong with them. And that is a very valuable thing. You'd be surprised how frequently people are discovered at 7 a.m. not doing well because no one went to look at them. And this system will let you know if they're breathing, know what their heart rate is, know what their saturation is, and know if they're in septic shock, whether they fell out of bed. It's a very useful thing to be able to apply machine vision to monitoring.
Great. Thank you, Art.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Sure, you're welcome. We now pivot back into a couple of speaking sessions. We'll get back to startups in the afternoon. So let me take this opportunity here to introduce our next speaker. It's my great honor to introduce our next speaker. He's a chief medical officer at Hims & Hers. He oversees all matters pertaining to provision of care, clinical outcomes, patient safety, healthcare information system, and strategic initiatives and programs that will enhance the Hims & Hers cares model. He's formerly Group Vice President, Chief Medical Officer at Walgreens, and also CMO, formerly at CMO and VP at Integrated Care Partners at Hartford Healthcare. Let's raise our virtual hands together for Dr. Patrick Carroll.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, Dr. Carroll.
Great.
Please.
And who advances the slide? Do I do that or do you folks do
that? Do you have it on your desktop if you want to just share and advance yourself?
Okay. I don't, so I'll just say go next slide. It's fine.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Saish, can you share Dr. Carroll's presentation, please?
Sure. Yes, one moment.
thanks.
Thanks. Go ahead, Dr. Carroll, while he pulls that.
So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I wanted to talk a little bit about where I think healthcare is going. I come from a very traditional healthcare background, over 35 years at various levels of the healthcare ecosystem, including 28 years as a primary care physician, and then I moved over to run a large multi-specialty group in Boston as a chief medical officer, and then went to the integrated delivery network world for several years at Hartford Healthcare, where I was the chief medical officer for the IDN, and then 5 years for Walgreens before starting at Hims & Hers in June of 2019. At Walgreens, I helped with their retail clinics, some of the digital health initiatives, and all of their healthcare strategy. And I joined Hims & Hers in June of 2019. The reason why I made that pivot to that startup environment is I really saw Hims & Hers the next iteration of consumer-facing care. So let's go to the first slide here, if we could.
I think just pulling that up, Dr. Carroll, just give us a second there.
Yeah, so what we do at Hims & Hers, we're a direct-to-consumer healthcare company. And we actually are only 3 years old or 3 years young. We went public through a SPAC in January of 2021, so just 2 months ago. It has been a really interesting journey. Company has evolved from offering about 10 to 12 conditions when I started there in June of 2019 to over 60 conditions today. So we've become more of a full scope telehealth company in a limited number of states to now we're in 50 states. It's really been embraced as a direct-to-consumer healthcare offering, particularly with the segment of the population that in a sense is underserved and doesn't access care in traditional manner, that is the millennials. So what we've found is it's a model that works. And this is coming from someone who was really in the traditional healthcare environment, as I kind of gave you my background. And I see direct-to-consumer is going to continue to grow as we've seen it grow in the market. Next slide. So really the entire healthcare market is evolving because we're seeing the digitization of healthcare. Flip to the next slide, please. And what we see is that this $4 trillion healthcare environment is ripe for disruption. Next slide. And why is this? This is because of some fundamental realities. The American healthcare system is broken and disjointed. That's hard for me to say as a traditional primary care physician, but it's expensive. Over 50% of Americans feel like they can't afford their deductible. 1/3 of folks have delayed care because of this. They find it's inaccessible. 77% of rural counties effectively have a primary care shortage. In behavioral health, which we now offer on Hims and Hers, the inaccessibility is even worse than this. It's inconvenient. You can't access care. It takes close to 30 days to get into a primary care physician, where I'm based out of in Massachusetts in the Boston area. That's over 100 days. And the demographic which we serve, the millennials, they don't access care in the traditional manner. They prefer virtual care. They Google up a symptom. They want to read content, and they want care on a 24/7 on-demand platform. Next slide. And so what we are looking at is really the digitization of healthcare. Why can't we go the route of an Amazon, Spotify, a Lyft? And that's what we're seeing happening today in healthcare. The digital revolution has really made it possible for us to deliver healthcare virtually, and the pandemic has just accelerated this. Next slide. So really, what are the tailwinds? First of all, it's those market forces that I talked about, but also don't underestimate the high deductible health plans. Probably about 50% of Americans today that are employed have high deductible health plans, and those deductibles can be $1,600 to $1,800 per year. 80% of the population that has high deductible health plans with deductibles at that level do not even use their insurance. So essentially they have a catastrophic insurance and they're paying out of pocket for the majority of their care. So consumers are really focused on what they're getting, what the cost is, and for them, cost and access takes precedence. What we've seen through the pandemic actually is an acceptance both by providers and customers in telehealth. Next slide. And so when we look at all of the markets that make sense for us at Hims and Hers, we started with hair loss and erectile dysfunction. We've expanded, or beginning 5 months ago, into anxiety and depression. We already offer dermatology. We're offering primary care, and we're looking at more of the chronic conditions because they're huge markets that are fundamentally underserved. So the fundamentals are the same. Next slide. And so this is the company I'm with. It's Hims and Hers. It's very different than anything I ever did before, but I'll explain to you why it works. So again, as we talked about our demographic, over 80% of the folks who come in to see us are first-time customers. So they're accessing healthcare through our system for the first time. And we service 70% of our customers are Generation X or younger. So millennials are a big part of our market. Next slide. So let's talk about the millennials. This is something that's counterintuitive, but they are in fact underserved, and they are having increasing frequency of chronic conditions. This is a really interesting Blue Cross Blue Shield study that came out about 1.5 years ago. 40% of, without intervention, mortality rates could climb up to more than 40% compared to other generations for millennials. We are seeing accelerated declines in their health. with probably about a $4,500 per year in real capital income, similar to similar age Generation Xers. So they are getting things like obesity, diabetes, hypertension, hyperlipidemia at a younger age, and the significant cost and quality of health implications to that. Next slide. Millennials are technology first. They would rather access care virtually and actually get their pharmacy fulfillment through delivery, as opposed to going into a traditional retail pharmacy chain or local pharmacy. And you'd engage them in a different way. So they are very concerned about access, price, and they want their conditions destigmatized. That's why we started with hair loss and erectile dysfunction and dermatology, because these are conditions they were not always comfortable talking to providers about. They actually get a lot of their information off the web. And what's important once you engage in bringing these millennials is to continue to outreach, do life cycle retention. And even the marketing alone is provocative in some ways. You know, how we traditionally in the world I was in advertise for healthcare and bringing someone into a traditional health system doesn't necessarily work for millennials. So we have support and relationships with folks, celebrities like Jennifer Lopez, because when she advocates for a dermatology product that we have through her Twitter, through her accounts, that draws in a significant amount of volume for us as a company. Next slide. And so really, again, looking at why go to the younger population? First of all, there's a need, but once you engage them, these folks through the years are actually going to start to develop and continue to develop chronic conditions that need care. So you may start with birth control and hair loss and evolve into the anxiety and depression, which we treat. But then beginning about a year ago, we offered primary care because our customers demanded it. They couldn't access care, particularly with the pandemic. And then we're looking at further evolution of what we offer into more chronic conditions, such as hyperlipidemia, hypertension, diabetes. Next slide. So what are we as a company? I think the simplest way to describe it, we're really the first digitally native, fully verticalized, multi-conditional health platform. So that's a mouthful. But basically what we do, we've created a consumer brand, something that our customers are identified with and trust. We have a distributed provider network. Like many telehealth companies, this is a friendly PC model. We have over 300 physicians who work off our platform. They're not employed directly by us, but we work with them very closely around the technology to connect them to patients. But as important as that is we actually work with them around quality. We have a very clinically focused EMR. The traditional EMR was not going to serve the needs of our customers, our providers, or our company well. So we developed our own native EMR, which is really frictionless. I've been in all of the EMRs, 6 major ones through my career. I can tell you the EMR we have at Hims and Hers allows us to deliver really efficient, high quality, HIPAA compliant care. And then we have a cloud pharmacy solution. So we partner with third-party pharmacies today, and we're actually have opened in Columbus, Ohio, a 300,000 square foot pharmacy where the majority of our fulfillment will come from in the future. Next slide. So what does this look like to a customer? It's really a fully verticalized telemedicine platform. And next slide. And how we're able to accomplish this is really to be fast and efficient. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we're delivering care. We're very affordable. For example, our primary care visits are $39, very affordable. And in our subscription model, someone can come in, get a visit, and then if they qualify through evidence-based guidelines for a prescription, they can get that prescription and unlimited provider visits for a price point of $20 to $30 per month. And again, the ubiquitous access 24/7. We're in 50 states and stigma-free. It's very non-judgmental, and the care is very personalized. This all appeals to our customers. Next slide. And so really, how are you able to do this? It's first you have to create a platform that does flawless verification. We have to make sure that the customers who come on our platform are actually who they are representing themselves to be. And we've actually created a really triple check verification tool up front. All of the consults are done with our affiliated providers, and they follow evidence-based guidelines. These guidelines are reviewed and updated by our team of specialty consultants. And each question that is asked follows evidence-based guidelines. The diagnosis is then made, and the prescription actually gets sent to the third-party cloud-based pharmacy. Next slide. So how does this look? Over 80% of the visits are actually done by our providers off a mobile device. So essentially, a customer will Google up a symptom, acne or erectile dysfunction or anxiety. And we have created curated content on our site such that the customer will read about their condition, get information about it, and then make a decision whether the condition that they're interested in and need a solution for can be served off our platform. If that's the case, they can, for example, for dermatology, click on skincare. And for acne and for aging, they are presented with a whole array of options. They answer a series of questions that document their past medical history. All of their medications are, through a SureScripts connection or on our EMR. Once they get through the questions and they qualify for the medications, in the 38 states where we're allowed to do asynchronous, that information is actually stored and forwarded to providers. There are states today that still require synchronous visits, so we are able to accommodate true face-to-face visits also. Once the physicians actually get that information, they communicate with that patient, they can ask further questions. There's a decision through that interaction made between the patient and the customer whether they qualify for medications. And if they do, in a subscription model, the patients are sent medication through the mail. And this obviates the need to actually show up at a brick and mortar pharmacy. Next slide. So these are the conditions we offer today. I can tell you over the next 6 months, we'll be adding at least 2 more categories on. Sexual dysfunction, that's erectile dysfunction, hair loss, dermatology, contraception, primary care. We actually developed through the pandemic a relationship with Rutgers on saliva home-based testing, where we're able to evaluate through a screening tool folks that may be having COVID symptoms. If they qualified, then a saliva test kit was sent to their home, and then they connected back to us in terms of further direction, depending on the results of the test. Behavioral health, I'm actually really excited about. Through the pandemic, there's an estimate that 20 to 30% of patients, particularly the millennials, are suffering with anxiety and depression. So we decided on our platform, not just to offer individual psychotherapy, but we're offering access to prescribers. Today, we can serve about 80% of the population for behavioral health needs. That is growing significantly as we hire on more board-certified psychiatrists and board-certified psychiatric nurse practitioners to deliver that care. For behavioral health, we require a synchronous visit at the beginning. So in other words, after you go through your screen, and we screen out as much as we can folks that are really needing primarily anxiety and depression evaluation of treatment. We bring them on the platform, they connect with the provider, they have that 45-minute, 1-hour initial consultation in a synchronous mode, and then a decision is made whether they qualify for medications. And if they do, those medications get sent to them. And we have high touch points through that next 12 months. It's with the same provider. At 3 weeks, we check in, at 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months. And then they have another synchronous visit at 12 months. This has been very, very well received. If you look at the top end of the funnel, just to service anxiety and depression, it's a fairly large population. We don't do any controlled substances. All of our medications are generic SSRIs and SNRIs, which are extremely effective for treating anxiety and depression. Next slide. You know, the bottom line is, what is the most important thing for us is that we are actually able to document that we have very high quality standards. Our EMR has been created such that we can review encounters. We've done over 25,000 encounter reviews. We can tell which physicians are outliers in terms of following guidelines or not following guidelines. We also can make sure that the customer interaction is top notch. Something we grade providers for is something called website manner. And the result is a really high provider rating of the experience. It's documented that the quality is top tier. And next slide.
So Dr. Carroll, we're running close on time, but I think you're almost at the end. So just wrap up maybe in a couple of minutes.
Be it. Yeah, this is my last one because I think this is one of the most important ones. Is how has this been received by our customers? We have an extremely high NPS. Really, it compares against anything in the industry. So customers like the experience. Our providers really enjoy practicing off our platform. We've had a very low provider attrition rate, and our company is growing because of the way we deliver care. The high quality and the expansion of scope of care is really appealing to them. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. It's been an exciting journey going from traditional healthcare to really direct to consumer, nearly full scope healthcare, and we feel like we can address about 80% of what I delivered in terms of care in a brick and mortar location. That's it.
That's a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Dr. Carroll. It's obviously healthcare is transforming, and this model is here to stay, and we'll be closely watching it. Thank you again.
Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks all. The next speaker is, before we, thank you, Dr. Carroll. It was a fantastic, we just ran out of time. I think I was going to ask you questions on NPS and stuff like that, but we'll talk later on about that. But I think we'll want to introduce Patty Ramanathan. And Patty has been working with us as an iValley venture partner here. And I'm going to share something about Patty. Patty is the founder of iValley Innovation Center, and he brings a lot of experience to our team, CharmHealth team. That's the reason we are partnering with Patty. And one of his great skill is he's able to network and bring a lot of multi-talent and different things to the table. And he's very active on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Clubhouse. And you have seen him talk. So he's going to talk about 10 minutes just to tell the audience and the attendees and how CharmHealth and iValley can work together with all the startups and even corporates. So Patty, take it away.
Thank you for the kind words. And I realize that I am between lunch and everyone, so I'll keep it short and crisp. And it's been fascinating for me, digital health. I'll qualify right at the start that it's a new area for me. And guys, can you see the slide that I have up on my screen?
Yes, Patty.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
So it's a new area, kind of more fintech enterprise technology person. Have been doing iValley. Prior to that was in financial services. a lot of great presentations from Dr. Carroll right now, from keynotes earlier, and the startup. This is kind of taking a little different, or taking a differently kind of evolution of venture capital and startup factory and things like that. So if you indulge me for a few minutes before lunch, and I'll tell you a little bit about iValley, and especially for the startups in the audience, do connect with me. We can have a chat and tell you a little bit more about iValley. So I think the premise of iValley is kind of branded a corporate accelerator, but how we see ourselves is kind of as a startup factory, right? An ecosystem startup factory. So if you look at how Silicon Valley startups were created, right? You had Stanford and Harvard and other big universities that would get the best talent and groom them to be entrepreneurs who built, like the examples there in the slide. Companies like Google and Facebook and even Microsoft prior to that. Then obviously we had evolution the last 20, 30 years. Y Combinator is one of them. There's several other accelerators in the Valley and other places. Coinbase that just went public, right? That was founded in Y Combinator. So their model was a little different, very focused mentoring and help with fundraising, help with scaling and things like that. What we see is that leaves out a lot of entrepreneurs, right? It has done a great job. Nothing against universities and accelerators, but it leaves a lot of entrepreneurs. There was the talk about the women funders and venture capitalists and entrepreneurs. I mean, that's one aspect, but we kind of broadly look at it inclusive. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that don't get the exposure. So our model, and we've tried this in fintech for the last 5 years, and we're kind of evolving that to health tech or digital health, is to kind of create that ecosystem, create that network of startups, of corporates, of investors, and platform providers like Charm, bring them together in a symbiotic manner. And that's kind of what iValley does. And as I mentioned, we did that in fintech. We've had a good track record in fintech with incubations, and also corporate innovation programs have had some exits. But I wanted to kind of put that in perspective as to how we're different from, say, traditional accelerators or traditional venture capital. In terms of what we're planning with digital health, with partnering with Charm, is this kind of ecosystem that we're calling it Health Tech Talk. We have a FinTech Talk brand, which has been in existence for some time. And what it is 3 parts, right? And you see the flywheel on the right? So how do you create value in the network? So yeah, we're an incubator. We work with early stage startups and even some kind of pre-seed startups, help them kind of get on board. But we also publish industry trends, not similar to what Gartner or others publish, but kind of more that sometimes like to call it kind of looking at the rearview mirror and projecting the future. We like to kind of project and what's going to come down, or where the puck is going, so to speak. And the media event part, I cannot emphasize enough. It is critical. I mean, it's one thing to build the future. It's one thing to know what the future will be, but it's also important to talk about it and write about it and kind of amplify the messaging. So we found that very important when we were doing the fintech aspects, and that's why we had the fintech talk event, and we do other things around that amplification. Partnering with other media and event companies. So we have a show, Health Tech Talk, and given the COVID environment, we're hosting that on Clubhouse. And we have it every Friday. We had a show yesterday where some of the presenters today, the startup presenters, actually previewed the show. We hosted it under a big club, and we had a lot of 200 plus folks. So the way the information is flowing, as I was remarking earlier, is changing. So we feel kind of talking about that and giving the limelight for some of our portfolio companies is very important. Briefly, and I know I can't see the clock when I'm doing this. I think I have a couple of more minutes, maybe. So what does it help? How does this help a startup, right? So having that network helps you obviously connect early with potential partners, potential market players, like what we're doing with the Charm Sandbox. It helps you de-risk, it helps you validate early, and then once you co-create with somebody and with investors bringing you capital, it helps you accelerate to the next level. So it's the same incubation and acceleration concept, but with a few add-ons. So
Eddie, you got 2 more minutes.
Thank you. So that's kind of what a startup gets. So we don't have like Y Combinator's and the other players. We don't have a formulaic approach to this. It's customized and a great emphasis on inclusion. Working on a couple of things in that, and we talk about inclusion very broadly, right? Gender, minorities. We actually hosted elite athletes, right? Olympians who are now getting into their second job, if you will. Veterans, right? Marine Corps individual who's now working in fintech as their second job at like 28. So we kind of view inclusion as broad, and our focus is kind of to bring that entire community that has these strengths and get them into the innovation and startup economy. Real quick conclusion. Like we invite both startups and corporates to join our network, and for corporates, obviously it benefits to be part of the innovation ecosystem, to connect, to co-create, and build solutions. Talent recruitment, I've been told by several folks that we work with, is very important, because all the talent's going to the startups. How do the incumbents get the new talent and the fast-looking talent? But as I said, connect with me. It's great to be on the event today and the opportunity to connect and host for the last hour. And I look forward to working with several of you in the coming days. Connect with me. I am on Twitter, LinkedIn, obviously in Vova here, and on Clubhouse as well. Follow me. It's mostly everything is Patty Ramanathan. Thank you. Venki, back to you.
Thank you, Patty, for your nice presentation. I think it was very interesting. And I think you made a good point of what's the differentiation between yours versus the incubators and the VC models. So hopefully many people will be interested to connect with you. So if you don't mind, can you put your contact info and stuff like that on the chat here? And then I think it's time for us to take a quick break from 12:30 to 12:45, 15 minutes break, and then we'll regroup at 12:45, and let me look at what we are going to talk about it. At 12:45, we're going to start tech-led innovations, going to be the next set of pitches. So it's going to be, I think the way we stacked it up was some of the very interesting ones are also, we have switched it around. So there are some good ones coming up, and some of them are even better ones, I would say. So stick around, and then also support the students. We are going to have the student session at the last couple of sessions, and also some nonprofits. So at 6 o'clock, we are going to stop, and then we are going to count, and then we are going to do the presentations and awards at between 6 and 6:30. So you can plan the day the way you want it, but let's take a quick lunch break, and we'll regroup at 12:45.
Great, thanks.
All right, guys, thank you.